Well, welcome. The Executive Director for WEConnect International here in Europe, and I'm delighted that you've joined us for today's webinar, Digital Marketing, Top Tips for Building a Focused and Integrated Approach. Our presenter today is Stephanie Hall from Uptake Strategies. They are a WEConnect International Certified Women's Business Enterprise, and in this session, Stephanie is going to be sharing an approach for building a digital marketing strategy to align to your priority customers, your brand and your growth objectives. To keep background noise to minimum, if I could just ask everybody to keep themselves on mute, please do use the chat functionality to ask questions, and there will be time at the end for Q&A. Stephanie's and the session is being recorded, so you can listen back to it again. So Stephanie, I won't take any more time. Thank you very much for presenting for us today. The floor, of course. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Maggie, and good morning or good afternoon to you wherever you are, and thank you for joining this this webinar. Great to be back here with the WeConnect group and to be talking to you today about an overarching strategy for digital marketing, or it might include digital and traditional marketing channels for your consumers. So I'm going to be talking about four sections, one about segmentation, one about building customer personas, different customer personas for your priority segments, then looking at the concept of customer experience, and then measurement and KPIs. Okay. I think I have Goran Sokolov from the Uptake team here also, who helped me very much pull together this presentation. So thank you, Goran, for that. So just to introduce myself. So as Maggie mentioned, I'm the founder and managing director of Uptake Strategies. And we're essentially a global healthcare strategy consultancy. So we work with big pharmaceutical and biotech companies, and we help them build their marketing capabilities, their marketing processes. So that means we do training, planning, strategy, and that sort of thing, essentially to build their commercial excellence and really focus on being customer-centric and implementing strong marketing strategies. So I'm going to be talking today, not obviously cross-sector, cross-industry, about marketing strategy processes, some steps, sharing some tools with you, and of course answering some questions. So I think Maggie, as always, will be viewing the chat box. So if you have questions for me, please let me know, and I will stop every now and then, and we can have some discussion. I'll make sure I'll do a sort of bit of an upfront, and then we can have an open session and discussion for perhaps particular issues relevant to your industries or your businesses. Thank you to a few of you who sent in some questions. I will attempt to answer some of those around how to work with different target groups, using social media and that sort of thing. So as Maggie mentioned, today's objectives, there's quite a few there, 5. I'm going to walk through, so I'm going to go fairly fast. I'm going to talk about segmentation, the concept of a customer persona, in particular to help then inform digital marketing tactics. So by that we mean which digital channels, which content, what style and tone, that sort of thing. How to build content and channels per segment over time. So a kind of overall experience or journey for your target customers, and then to understand the concept of customer experience and how to define and deliver that. So we'll talk we hear an awful lot now around overall customer experience, in particular in the digital space, and we'll be thinking about how to do that, how to deliver a better one, a consistent one. What are those key principles of customer experience? And some of the techniques around getting your tone right, especially in 2020 and with the global pandemic, and thinking about how to communicate effectively your values and your purpose as a brand or a business, because more and more those organizations that do that are more and more successful at engaging the hearts and minds of their consumers or customers. And then lastly, one of my all-time favorite topics is key performance indicators. So we'll think about how you can measure the effectiveness of your digital channels. So lots to go through. Could I just have a little bit of audience feedback now for what are some of the key questions or why you've joined the session today, just so I can make sure that I tackle as many as possible. So if you could just use the chat function and share a little bit about those topics. I know we're going to aim to cover quite a lot, and I will do my best. So thank you if you can sort of put some a few comments down on what you would be most interested in hearing and seeing about. And of course, as I go through, any specific questions you have on what I'm going to share. So I thought I would start the session just with thinking about sort of what has changed. We hear obviously a lot about 2020 and the global COVID-19 pandemic and how this is disrupting businesses, obviously consumers, in terms of their behaviour and use of digital channels. Just to share a few pieces of data really just to set the scene. So this was from a Chartered Institute of Marketing webinar last month or so from the CIM, from Nick Baggett, who's the course director there. Thank you for sharing that on a webinar. So this is TPN research, which is the UK and US over a year, and you can see here that the quality of the experience through digital channels is actually, there's quite a few negative things. You can see them in the red there. There are some positives about digital marketing being more efficient. People can buy more items, new things, but there are also a number of concerns around the overall impacting the overall customer experience with e-commerce. I'm sure it's no surprise either, though, that some of the other statistics here that now more and more people are purchasing online, trading online, and shopping online in equal measure in store and online. Significant shifts in statistics. This one different source, Hootsuite, showing increased social media use by country. This was from April of this year. So you can see if I know we have a number of UK people joining. Here we are at 38% increase in usage, and a number of other countries there. So obviously more and more online use, more and more social media use, and this is also contributing to what some of us can be feeling overwhelmed with email and some of these digital channels. And the challenge for a digital marketeer is to think about really how to focus our efforts on the right customer or consumer, build the right kind of content to cut through all that digital overload. So a few things now. I'll start off with a bit about segmentation. Segmentation, one of the most important marketing disciplines. Companies who can get their segmentation right are likely to really drive their growth. So I'm just going to talk a bit about being clear on our market and why we need to segment. So if a market is an aggregation of all the products or services, customers who buy, but we need to consider actually the largest the overall aggregate of all those products and services is our market. And then our segments are the different types of customers who might, as you can see in this example, in the button market, who might consider why they buy buttons, and we could consider the different reasons for them. They could form segments. Okay, so a slightly more technical term here then. What is segmentation? The process of breaking down a total market for a product or service into distinct subgroups or segments. So a question I would ask you all on this webinar is, how are you currently segmenting your customers or consumers? Okay, have you refreshed and revised it in 2020? Is it still competitive? And are you truly using segmentation to your advantage? And And I'll talk a little bit about around that and some different options for segmentation. So why do we segment? Ultimately, we want to think about all the possible customers or consumers we have for our brand or our company. And essentially, we want to think about their different attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors. And essentially, what segmentation is going to do is help us focus so that we can tailor or adapt our messages, our content, the use of our digital channels, as well as more traditional channels, to our different to the different segments. We might also consider different types of pricing point and/or products and services. And so, if we can get a good segmentation strategy that really can inform the whole of your business plan, your growth plan. And many businesses that I see now, are revising their segmentation through 2020, as we've had such a disruption in both the way that we live and purchase and interact. Okay. And then by prioritizing the different segments, we can then develop and allocate budgets more appropriately. So to invest heavily, perhaps in one segment where you feel you have a competitive advantage. Okay, so different types, how can we segment? There are sort of probably four key approaches to segmentation in consumer markets. So we've got the psychographics, the different attitudes, values, and lifestyle characteristics. We've got geographics, so thinking about the actual, where your target audience lives or is based. We've got a behavioral one, so the behaviors that relevant to your particular product or service. Often the adoption ladder is one we might use in terms of behavior, so frequency of purchase or engagement. And then of course we've got the demographics, so social characteristics in terms of age, gender, that sort of thing. So sort of four key approaches to segmentation. And sometimes what you may want to do is use a mix of them to come up with a segmentation model where you might have 4 or 5 segments across your whole market, describe them well, and we'll come on to talk about customer personas and how to do that, to prioritize them, so to think where is both the largest size and where are you best able to play or to win strategically. Okay, and then to show that diagrammatically, and then think about what are the subsequent decisions that you could make. So, question for you now. Hope to get some more audience engagement and feedback around segmentation. What are some of the barriers to segmentation? So either in the chat box, or if anyone would like to come onto camera and let me know, what are some of the frequent barriers to segmentation? Lots of nice questions in the chat. Thank you for those. So any barriers? Often talk about segmentation from anyone's experience. Let's have a look. Anyone coming through on the chat? Too general, Melanie, thank you for that. Segmentation, yes, can be too general. I think if I understand that correctly, you're thinking about just having sort of too high level or not specific enough. Yeah, some nice ones, Maggie, thank you. Yes, is there a lack of clarity? So do you know actually who is buying from you, your products or services? Do you know exactly the steps in the decision-making process or the purchase, the purchase process and the evaluation? Absolutely. Thank you, Melanie, for saying yours may be a bit too general. Yeah. Thank you. There's another good point here, is just sometimes taking the time to consider and understand your audience. Certainly from my own experience, I've found that at times, if you're in a high growth or highly volatile, changing environments, you know, just to be able to step back from operations and have a think about exactly, you know, who are your most loyal customers? Who are your most profitable ones? Do you have the data to even show that? Have you asked your customers, you know, a bit around the profile, so you can collect, through engaging with them, better information about them? So yeah, lots of challenges there. Okay. So let's come on now to customer personas, which I have to say is one of the most enjoyable parts of my work in working with our clients at Uptake, is helping teams build really rich customer personas. So if we've segmented our market, we've now prioritized the different segments, we know who we really want to focus on, and there might be 2 or 3 different customer segments. For those, what you may want to do is then deep dive and build a customer persona. And essentially what this is a picture or a diagram. I'll show you some examples of those core target customers, where you want to lift them off the page and show them as a real person in order to take better decisions in your digital marketing strategy to engage them. So here's our definition of a persona. A persona is a fictional person. So this is a slight fiction. We're going to give this person a name, a character, a picture, and we're going to really try and get inside that customer's shoes and that life. Start to ask a number of richer 360-degree kind of focused questions to help us generate better insights and then make better decisions about how to then engage with that particular customer. So what is it that we ideally would like them to do in terms of engagement, purchase, recommendation of our brand or services, and then really what kind of a person are they, and use that to really then think through the different messaging, content, which channels we might use. A question I'd love to ask you on the chat as well: does anyone currently use customer personas? Be great to hear any feedback there. So why build customer personas and profiles? Essentially what we want to do is really get to know our customers better as a team. So you have a team who's, you know, if you have a sales team, customer facing teams, marketing teams, you know, across your businesses, is to really think, who are our core customers and what is influencing their decisions? How do they spend their time? And in particular through 2020, what has changed and shifted? Here's an important one. What language do they use? Kind of actually, how do they speak? Let's make sure we are absolutely tuned into their language. We can communicate better if we have strong customer personas and profiles. I'll show you how those work. And in particular, you might want to consider having a customer persona champion in your team, someone who really at every single meeting or for decisions thinks about the customer. And then, of course, using these the personas, we are actively using segmentation to drive a disproportionate investment in our highest customer segments and therefore increase our return on investment. So I'm just going to check on the chat. Anyone? Oh yes, got some support here for developing customer personas. That's good to see. Yeah, information to build it can be a challenge to get the level of richness, and of course things like going and observing where possible, observing customers in situ, or if you have a store in store, that sort of thing, or seeing how they interact on social media, you know, can really give you a sense of your different personas and help you build them. Okay, so we've talked a bit about the value of a persona. So essentially what we want in a persona is a deep understanding of the characteristics and behaviors of your key segments. It's also a way of pressure testing the messages, the language, your programs and your plans. So, you know, how would this segment, if you give your segment a name, you know, designer Jane, well, how would she respond to that? and it helps us keep the segment in mind at all times, okay, as a team. So key elements in a customer persona, and perhaps I'll just start and share with you a few visual ones now. So these were just sourced from the internet. You can see lots of different, if you just do a Google Images search on customer personas, there are lots that are different teams or businesses or academics have put up, and you can see essentially some commonalities across these. You know, we'll have a picture. I think it's really important to have a picture of a, you know, of a person there to bring your customer segment to life, your persona. You can see there's lots of different ways through, you know, structuring your persona to look at the demographics there, their motivations, their personality, their goals, their frustrations, and perhaps their use of digital or other, you know, other channels to help with then you building your digital marketing strategy. So you can see there, Tommy Technology, you have a bit of an, you know, lots of different buckets of information there to, you know, to help engage with either Tommy Technology, designer Danielle, or Tamara Cavendish, a very grand name. And one of the things, I'll give you an example here that we use in the Uptake team is a customer persona template that looks a little bit like that. So has things like some dashboards around how this particular customer has their attitude to change, their digital orientation, their relationship to companies. And then you can see here, there's kind of 8 little boxes of different informations, the word they use, how they interact, communities and influencers, demographics, that sort of thing. And again, for this sort of thing, you would give you'd give this young man, who I think from the internet is badged as a young entrepreneur, you would give him a name, and let's call him Anthony, and then you would fill out, and as a team, try to lift Anthony off the page to really understand his particular persona, and then help that with some of these categories. You can see this should help you then design content and messages, design interactions, and then digital channels in the right style and tone and timing to really engage effectively with that particular customer. Okay, and you can see here some of the common areas in a customer persona. And of course, you can tailor your persona structure to your particular industry, you know, or sector. But generally, we'll be looking at demographics, hopes, desires, beliefs, also frustrations and pain points. Because if we can understand those, they can be very helpful for us in terms of you know, solving that particular problem. Information seeking behavior, how they like to engage. You know, some consumer segments, for example, absolutely do not want to be texted by a company. Others, you know, are very happy with email. Others really would rather not have their information saved at all online. So kind of understanding that. And then, of course, their influences. All right. So, oh, and I've got a couple of examples here, as also quite liked from Starbucks, just to share with you some personas. These were in the public domain of how Starbucks coffee has identified a number of different personas there. You've got Taylor, the college student, Edward, the corporate worker, and Sue, the stay-at-home mom. So, you know, I'm sure Starbucks through 2020 will be looking and refining those as we think about having online ordering of coffee and that sort of thing. Okay, so I'm going to move on now from personas to talk about building content and channels and customer experience. But can I just check? I'm going to stop for a minute. Maggie, are there any questions from the team that perhaps I should?
No, just lots of people sharing their insight and advice and saying that, you know, they love the personas. Some of them use them a lot, and I'm really hoping what you're sharing is really helpful for everyone. I mean, I'm scribbling down lots of notes as we're going, and I've got one question. How many would you normally have for
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that depends on essentially how complex your market is, but also can be a function of how much, essentially, how many resources you have, promotional resources. So, because essentially, to have, if you were in a sort of startup phase, I think there was a pre-question about that. You may just want to have one core target segment and then really focus your promotional efforts, your engagement on that core, that one core persona and segment. But actually, if you've got others, or a slightly broader product and service range, or you do have more resources to be able to tackle more, you might want to do 2 or 3 or even 4. But I probably wouldn't do any more than that. Otherwise, it's not really sounding like we've got a focused segmentation strategy. If we've got 6, 7, 8, or 9, that makes sense.
And Muta's just checking. Persona equals the segmentation.
Yes, so you would create a persona, which is a more detailed sort of deep dive understanding of the priority segments. Yes. So you might have 3, you've come up with a segmentation strategy and you've identified 3 core segments, then you would do 3 core personas. And what that persona does is give that segment a name, lift them off the page, give them a picture. I've got some feedback there. Someone's got 4 types of segment. Great. The key thing with segmentation to make it work, though, and if you have, say, 3 or 4 segments, is to make sure that you're using one of the core principles of segmentation, which is to invest disproportionately in them. So what we would recommend is that you actually, if you prioritize them from 1 to 4 and make sure that you're investing disproportionately, so more in segment 1, much more than in segment 4. Try to avoid what I would call playing it safe and putting a quarter, that sort of thing. Right, let me talk a little bit about multi-channel and what we mean by multi-channel or omni-channel. So essentially, building a strong multi-channel or omni-channel strategy, we're thinking about the right customer segment with the right message and content in the right channel, at the right time, when they're at the right state of engagement with your brand, service, or company. There are lots of different definitions, but essentially what we're thinking about here is putting that customer segment at the center and thinking of all the different channels, digital channels. They could be offline channels as well, especially if we're thinking about planning for the future, thinking about all of those channels you could use. And then we're going to think about getting the right mix of those channels and content for each segment that you've prioritized. And of course, multi-channel, there's been lots of good lots of good statistics and data about what multi-channel delivers: up to 30% more customer reach, 25% more influencers and brand advocates. This is actually healthcare information, but I think it works across consumer markets as well. And that if you use multiple channels to deployed, but in a customized mix, you're going to be more effective. So essentially, we'll be thinking about how are you using your email, your website, social media, perhaps LinkedIn, anything, Facebook, Instagram. How are you using those different channels with your segments? Okay. One of the things we really like to encourage our teams that we work with and our clients is to not only, when you've built a priority segment, you've built that customer persona for them, nice rich persona, is that you define actually what is the ask of that particular segment. So what is what we might call the behavioral objective that you want? So actually, how do you want to change perhaps their for the positive, their thinking, their attitude about a particular product or service or concept? And then what it essentially is the behavior that you would like. And it may sound obvious, but just thinking about, are you wanting them to purchase more of a certain particular product that you have or service? Are you looking to cross-sell? That sort of thing. So really defining that behavioral objective so that when you're thinking about your digital marketing channels and content, you're being very, very focused on that behavioral objective. Okay. And thinking ideally through taking your customers through the adoption pathway. So from essentially being perhaps unaware of your brand or your products or services, step by step to becoming a user, repeat user, loyal, and then an advocate who is actually, would be recommending your products and services. What disruptive digital marketing is trying to do is hotwire this adoption pathway so that you jump, from having a new client or consumer all the way through as fast as you can to being an advocate. And that's what high growth businesses and brands do, is that they deliver such an excellent product, service, customer experience with purpose and emotion, so that actually clients or customers will jump through to being an advocate and will be recommending your particular product or service very, very fast. Of course, some markets, it does take, some clients in certain markets and customers it does take a lot, that adoption ladder can take much longer. Okay, so key elements of multi-channel engagement to just think about these building blocks for your digital marketing strategy. Of course, messages. So what are those messages? The language you use in them, the tone, that kind of thing. Some of that, if you have you're working in regulated industries, you may of course need to, work very carefully on the content of those messages. Then we've got the content overall, and by content we mean actually where the messages sit in terms of the design and style of your website, your emails, other content. We tend to build too much cluttered content that can confuse consumers, in particular on websites now, and there's a big move to being much clearer, cleaner and simpler in our content. And then of course we've got channels. By that with channels we mean things like an email, website, social media, thinking about with all the different channels you could possibly use for your particular market. And then building that you can see those three things for each segment. Okay, so there would be different. And a challenge we have when working with our clients and teams is to really make sure that we're not doing one size fits all messages and content and channels, but we are really, if you've got 3 priority segments or personas, you are then really creating different messages, content and channels for each one, and then setting KPIs to measure them. Okay. I'm going to move on just in the interest of time now to talk a little bit about customer experience. What do we mean by customer experience? Here's a little definition here from the Customer Experience Association. They do some really good programs and profiles. There are also some customer experience awards based in the UK, where there's you can see some great examples of companies transforming their internal processes in order to deliver much better customer experience. So what do we mean? Design and refine customer interactions to either meet or exceed customer expectations. Okay, so we want to essentially, there are some core ingredients of customer experience, and they're not, people may think, oh, is this terribly complicated? Well, not actually. Delivering a customer experience should be consistent. The company or brand should be easy to work with, and it should be trusted. Okay, so actually the customer should feel that they trust the particular brand or company that they're working with. And ultimately, if you can deliver these 3 things, you can then deliver, and just better than the competition, you can then deliver more loyal customers, more advocacy or recommendations, sharing, and sustainable profit. That's the concept of customer experience. And I think the one other piece I would add across this is to deliver a customer experience. Customers want to feel connected, in particular Generation Z and post-millennials want to feel connected to your brand or your company, and that feel that the values and what you are doing moves beyond just the commercial setting and moves to essentially doing good, being innovative, and playing a positive part in the community or in your business, thinking about how to do that beyond just perhaps some, you know, charitable donations. So another approach here, this is from the Customer Experience Masterclass. We've adapted here on elements of customer experience. It should be emotional. So how do we make people feel when we engage with them? It should be functional. Does it do what people want it to do? So actually, does the product or service that we deliver, does it deliver? And then is it accessible? So how easy is it for customers to find you, okay, online, to be just kind of one click away, something like that? How does your digital marketing, do your assets work? If they click on an email, does it take you immediately to the right page on your website to purchase something, if that's your model? And those three things here will deliver an overall positive experience. Okay, I think the other one I see as an important element is also how to handle complaints or questions or even returns if you're more in a shopper setting. Really do support that emotional piece and how your customers will trust you. Okay, now a little bit more customer experience theory here. So what ideally you're wanting to do is have kind of what I would call random experiences of your customers, which are kind of the bare minimum, to intentional experiences. So you actually describe and define that experience. What do you want your customers to think and feel and do about you? And then if you can deliver sustainable, differentiated experience, so better than the competition, consistent, you'll be into a high growth phase. Okay, some stats here just to speak to around customer experience. So you probably don't, I'm aware of some of these stats. 57% of customers have stopped buying from a company because a competitor provided a better experience. So essentially, if you know, it's a major driver for losing customers to competitors. 80% of customers who say experience a company provides is as important as its products and services. So there's hence the whole, and there's some lovely examples of how, for example, hotel chains such as Hilton have really stepped up their delivery of a customer experience and are engaging their internal staff with delivering that customer experience to their guests and driving up much more you know, repeat bookings through their hotel chains. And then we've got 67% of customers who are willing to pay more for a great experience. So if you can define, you segment your customers, profile the personas, define and deliver that customer experience, you should then be able to increase your prices as well, if you get to that point there in the differentiated experiences. Okay, now I'm going to move us on now to some principles around great customer experiences from Matt Watkinson. So great customer experiences strongly reflect that customer's identity. So going back to that persona that you've built. Leave nothing to chance, so needing to really think through your internal processes that are clear and consistent to do that. That you set your customer experience and then meet them or exceed them. Should feel effortless. It says are effortless to the customer, but we know they may need some good hard work to map and deliver. And then they should be socially engaging. Okay, so ultimately what we're trying to do with customer experience is move from just a transactional customer experience, you can see step, 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 to a relational one. And if I just show you what we mean by that, if you were invited to a meeting, you agreed to attend, you attended it, and you applied something, that would be a customer meeting. You can see here what can map with that sort of experience is a whole series of touch points and things that you could do to improve that overall customer experience. Okay, so how is the invitation made? How is it personalized? How much time will it take up? Is it easy to book? Yeah, is there a warm welcome when you attend the meeting, whether it's a virtual meeting or a real one? You know, is there an information pack? Are there expenses? Do you discuss, have you got time to discuss and network with your peers if this is a business meeting? So one of the things you might want to do is, and we'll come on then, to look at a customer experience map, and then to think of all the different elements of that customer experience and have a look at what would be, what you could do to improve the overall experience. And I won't move through all of these 10 steps, but just perhaps show you a little bit about customer experience mapping. Again, this is from a recent Chartered Institute of Marketing webinar. And you can see here, you may want to, for each of your personas, then actually create an experience map. And you can see there in green, those green chevrons. What those are doing is essentially mapping the different phases of your customers or your clients or your consumers through different steps in their engagement with you. You map the touch points, what their goals are, but about their mindset. You can see there the emoticons. Are they happy or sad as they interact with you? And then where are those opportunities where you might need to either improve or engage your consumer or your customer more? And mapping this on, you can do it digitally as a team, or, with a poster and a flip chart, is a really great exercise to do. And then to think about how then essentially you're going to build better content, messages, engagement experiences to engage with that particular persona. Okay, I'm conscious of time now, so I'm just going to move on a little bit to defining key performance indicators, and then to open up some questions and comments. So a little bit about measurement. So essentially what we're talking about here is the measurement control. So how do I know whether my digital marketing strategy is working? And there are, the good news with digital engagement is there are lots of things we can measure, but of course what we must be careful to do is avoid what I would call vanity metrics. By a vanity metric, what I mean are easy things. Oh, Liz, I can see is smiling. So easy digital metrics that actually just don't tell us anything. So have a think about that. Essentially, what we need to be doing, and I'm referencing here a paper I wrote a few years ago called The Joy of KPIs, and essentially absolutely essential part of your digital marketing strategy needs to be your measures or your KPIs, okay? So that you will know, if we take that priority segment, we take that persona, we define that experience, we then need to say, well, how many customers or consumers in that segment do we have? How many, what kind of purchases or engagement do we want? And then what spend? And we're going to work through a numerical logical piece to set some KPIs to know if for that segment your digital marketing strategy is working. Now, this is quite a big topic to cover at speed, but essentially what a KPI should do, it's a metric, a core metric that will help you understand if you're delivering versus your objectives. So that, think back to that behavioral objective of that consumer or customer. And we should use KPIs to evaluate the success strategically. So are we getting more purchases, more loyal customers, more profitable customers? Are we delivering successful customer experiences? But then also operationally, are we seeing engagement with our content? and to think more, than just beyond clicks, for example. Okay. Many teams we work with will use a management framework like a balanced scorecard and have different KPIs related to perhaps a customer perspective, digital marketing metrics, the efficiency of the internal operations. So you build a balanced Kaplan style scorecard for your KPIs. So setting good metrics to analyze the results and improve learning. So clearly what we should be doing is looking at that behavioral change or objective that you set for your priority customers, thinking about how that translates to a business outcome, like a new consumer or customer, more purchases or cross-selling opportunities, or more loyal consumers sharing their good experience. And that's where we see successful systems such as Trustpilot and other, and other consumer rating organizations. And then our KPIs ideally should be simple, transparent, and able to be tracked, which I think often can be easier said than done. You may need to think about your KPIs in terms of what is available, what good information do you have to pull together to use in your digital marketing strategy. So a few key principles just before I close would be keep it smart. So make sure that you have your business objectives, your behavioral objectives, you turn them smart. So we mean specific, measurable, time-based, that your KPIs have absolute targets as well. So we're looking for example, 80 new consumers in that territory, or we're wanting 100 satisfied brand loyal consumers in this sector. And then one consideration to think about is for KPIs are whether they're input, leading, or lag. Okay, so to help us show what are, ideally we will want leading indicators of future business growth. So I think I'm about run out of time. Let me just work through a couple of examples of KPIs by channel. So if we're in a B2C market, here you can see on the left-hand side some of the different channels that you may want to use: website, social media, email. There are a number of different KPIs or metrics that you could use to assess the operational effectiveness of those digital marketing channels. The key thing is to have a range of metrics for each, for each particular channel, and just to think about the combination of your channel mix, not just one channel in isolation. We've got the same if you're any of you are in B2B markets against the appropriate KPIs. So there's a little bit more there around paid search, conferences, trade shows, and some examples there of KPIs you can use. I think these slides will be available after the webinar. So with that, I think what I'll do is pause for breath and perhaps take a few questions or comments. Thank you so much for using the chat box so productively as well.
Wow, Stephanie, thank you so much. You have covered so much in just a short amount of time. So in nearly like 50 minutes, there's loads there. And everybody who's listening, and if you're listening back to the recording, I know there was a ton of stuff there. This was meant to spark some ideas for you. You know, it's a 45-minute webinar and a lot. So those core areas around the segmentation, the customer personas, the actual customer experience, and then the kind of measurements and KPIs. And Stephanie, thank you so much. That was so. Please, if you've got questions, please do drop them into the chat box. I think Melanie, you'd asked about whether some examples of KPIs. So I hope that the last couple of slides about the B2B and the B2C has given you some insight there. I thought this question might come up around whether you have any recommendations, Stephanie, on software that's used for measuring results. It says, what kind of software do you recommend or use for campaigning and for measuring results? I don't know.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Let me try and answer this. So, I mean, the question is, the simple answer is this: it depends what system you're using. So if you're using an email system, then there will usually be a back-end analytics tool that you can then use to look at the email engagement, open rate, unsubscribe rate, and that sort of thing. Obviously, if you have a website, you can look in at the analytics part. Again, I'm not a web designer, but there's a back end part that you can look, and of course you can use things like Google Analytics and that sort of thing to assess your website. So I think it really does depend on what particular tool or channel that you're using. The key thing is to use something and spend some time assessing and evaluating your digital marketing effectiveness. At Uptake, we use a lot of LinkedIn, so engage with our community on LinkedIn, and there are fantastic analytics there to look at impressions, engagement, and then we track them on a spreadsheet. All our different channels and engagement activities. So we can see what's the highest performing content, what engages our particular community and clients most, and when do we not quite get it right and why. And I think just doing that kind of measurement review is an important discipline, to do.
And that was one of the first questions I actually wrote down when you first started to talk about segmentation. I was like, well, and I asked this question about not how many segments, but how many customer personas. But how often, you mentioned about review, how often would you review your segmentation? I mean, you referenced obviously this year has been so different for so many businesses. So
yes,
most businesses will have done some kind of review, but I'm going to say in a normal moment, if normal will ever come back. How often would you be recommending that businesses look at kind of reviewing that segment?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm afraid that probably it's the answer to that one is it probably depends on how fast moving your particular sector or environment is. So if you've got a lot of change in terms of churn of new entrants, new product competitors coming in, out, you've got a lot of seasonality, anything like that, you may need to review your segmentation strategy and your personas more often. If we're looking at a less volatile, perhaps market and or environmental situation, then you may want to do it, every 6 months or even a year. But sometimes that can be disrupted. Something can happen, and someone buys, one of your big competitors, and they start investing much more heavily. So if there's what I would call a trigger event that you see, then that's the time where you might want to get together as a team and say, right, let's regroup, let's refresh, let's make sure we have really understood our segments and those personas correctly, and what might we want to do differently.
Yeah, and indeed, I guess their buying journey and what other impacts might change the traditional journey. Okay, right. We've got a couple of questions coming. Liz, you've asked about the slides. I think Stephanie's going to PDF the slides and then ping them over. And when Jay will send a follow-up note with the recording, and the slides will be via PDF. So that's fine. And then I'm just saying, lots of people saying thank you very much. Loads of great insights. So thank you. To approach a new client studying spirit, will it turn into a cold calling when approached? I don't quite understand the question. Saying, is it a question to approach a new client after studying its persona? Will it turn into a cold calling when approached? Do you maybe just want to come off mute and just ask that question? I haven't quite understood what you. So you're showing up is Hassan. I think you were. I was looking at. No, I don't know your name, but please come off and. No, okay. So I guess that's just, obviously you can have lots of different clients, you can do all this, but essentially it will still be an element maybe of cold calling. But what I thought your journey was the slide that had the arrows on, the kind of the ribbon around kind of going from don't know anything and then become an advocate by the end of it, and how you can speed that process up. And I guess then the stuff won't feel so much like cold calling in inverted commas if actually you're hitting the right spots with them, because actually they're already engaged because you've got the right content at the right time, all those different elements you said about the right content at the right time in the right channel.
Indeed.
Right.
I mean, generally, I mean, again, it would be industry or sector specific, but very, very what we could call proactive or cold calling or what can be perceived as invasive sales and marketing practices are, you know, people are putting up very, very strong walls, both practical ones and also emotional walls to businesses and companies that do that. So the kind of reverse is how to put out some really interesting content digitally that people can find you easily, and that actually make people want to engage with you from that side, rather than perhaps that sort of more outbound
Absolutely,
you know, telephone or that sort of thing.
Yes, whatever it might look like for the different firms, right? Because everybody will be doing it. And I'm just, because there was lots of comments at the beginning about why people were joining today's webinar, and there was all sorts of stuff. So I hope that in the space of a very short hour that we've been able to inspire and give you some different ideas to take away, because there's all sorts of questions from just getting new ideas, understanding more about personas and how you can integrate your approach. People were interested in, digital content. Actually, Annabelle had a question about digital content, more specifically how frequently to change it and update messaging. But I think we've just talked on that about how often you're reviewing your segmentation and taking account of other changes in the market around you. With just questions about communities and KPIs, which we have touched on, and I know even if only for a few minutes, but I did see, Stephanie, on your slides that you had referenced where some of the images had come from. So I guess people can
absolutely. So in my slides, everything, all the data, the statistics, we reference and source everything, both from the public domain, and there are, where there's the odd report and that sort of thing. So absolutely. There was one other question, I think, which was just around in the startup use of digital marketing in the startup phase. And I guess if I go back to when my business was a lot younger, a lot smaller, we just started working, just basically tried different things, just focused on one core channel, which for us was LinkedIn, and sort of grew our knowledge and capabilities and skills in that one channel first of all, and then grew and expanded the sophistication of what we do step by step. So it's worth having a think about how many channels you want to use for your business at what time, so that so you don't have, perhaps you don't have your resources sprinkled too thinly across too many channels, but think actually really about dominating just a few.
Brilliant. I think you've almost answered the last question that had come in about saying how using LinkedIn to connect and win customers. Any quick tips? But I think if it is earlier stages, it is about focusing in on one, and as you say, not trying to, you can't boil the ocean. So choose one, and kind of focusing on that, and really. And Stephanie, I was just going to ask, as we're in the final minute, if you have questions, or you've obviously included your email address on this final slide. People contact you directly with questions?
Yes, feel free. If you'd like to link in or connect, or drop me a mail. I can see some lovely positive comments in the chat box. So thank you so much. It's lovely to get a bit of audience feedback here, especially as I motored through quite a lot of different pieces of marketing strategy there. But I hope you can see it's absolutely my passion, working in strategic marketing, and I wish everyone on the webinar great success with reviewing and revising your digital marketing strategy, and helping drive growth, albeit in these changing and volatile times.
Absolutely. Stephanie, thank you so much. This is great. And thank you everybody for joining live today. And as I said, if any of you are still listening to the recording, thank you for getting to the very end. That's amazing. You've been able to maximize and take advantage of all the brilliant insight that Stephanie has shared for us today. So thank you very much. Thank you to those of you for joining. Stephanie, big thank you to you and to the Uptake Strategies team for sharing this insight. And it's great. And I know for many businesses, it's really, there's so many different things that you do within your business, but obviously marketing is one of the key components. You need to be able to reach your customers, whatever that looks like, whatever segment they're in and whatever their customer persona, we need to be able to reach them all, and then understanding how they're experiencing that, that journey with you, and then understanding if we know what we're doing and the measuring it all. So this was brilliant. I think, Stephanie, we could almost do an individual webinar on each one of the 4 topics.
I think we could.
Well,
I'm often quite ambitious. But no, that's given, you know, the key thing is just if you've taken away some notes, some insights, some actions to apply to your business. Yeah. I hope that's the case.
Brilliant.
And wish you all a great rest of the day.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Stephanie. Everyone, great to see you all. Take care. Thanks.